It was almost 9 p.m., and the rain was falling hard on the rusty zinc roofs in Kibera, Nairobi. Not soft rain. This one slapped the ground like it was angry. Inside one small room, Joke stood still, holding her phone with shaking hands. Her landlord's message was short. If rent is not paid by tomorrow morning, pack out. No excuses. Joke whispered, God, again? Her husband, Sibusiso, sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his palms together. His shirt was wet with sweat, even though the night was cold. She didn't even wait till month end, he said softly. It's only the 18th. Before Joke could answer, there was a loud knock. Knock, knock. Not a polite knock. This one sounded like someone breaking a door. Sibusiso stood up fast. She's here. The door flew open before he even reached it. Mrs. Dlamini, their landlady, stepped in like she owned their breath. Her high heels clicked loudly on the tiled floor. Click, click, click. She didn't greet. She never did. She folded her arms and rolled her eyes. So you people are hiding? She said. Joke forced a small smile. Good evening, Ma. Don't ma me. Mrs. Dlamini snapped. Is greeting going to pay my money? Sibusiso tried to stay calm. Madam, please. I lost my job last month. I told you. We are trying. Mrs. Dlamini laughed. Not the happy kind. It was dry and sharp. Trying? She said. Did I build this house with trying? She walked around the room slowly, kicking a small bucket with her foot. Look at this place, she continued. Dirty people. Always full of stories. Joke's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to talk, but her throat felt blocked. Mrs. Dlamini stopped in front of her. You, she said, pointing at Joke's face. Your husband is useless. And you, what do you even do? Joke whispered, I sell vegetables at the roadside. Mrs. Dlamini laughed again. Vegetables? Is that what you will use to pay my rent? Sibusiso clenched his fists. Please don't insult my wife. That was a mistake. Mrs. Dlamini's face changed. Oh, you're talking now? She said. Do you know who I am? She moved closer, her heels clicking faster. This house belongs to my family. My late husband built it with his sweat. People like you should be grateful I even rented to you. She turned to the door and shouted, Tomorrow morning, I want my money or I want this room empty. Then she paused and added quietly, And if you try any nonsense, I'll show you fire. She slammed the door behind her. The room went silent. Only the rain spoke. Joke dropped slowly onto the bed and covered her face. Her shoulders shook. Sibusiso knelt in front of her. Please don't cry. She sobbed harder. Where will we go with the baby? Yes, the baby. That was the part Mrs. Dlamini didn't know yet. Or maybe she knew, and didn't care. Sibusiso sighed deeply. Let me call my parents in Durban. Joke looked up quickly. No. Your father already warned you. He said we should not marry without money. Sibusiso looked away. My mother will understand. Just then the phone rang. Sibusiso checked the screen and froze. It's my mother, he said. He answered slowly. Hello, Mama. A loud voice came through the phone. Sibusiso, his mother said. Your father just heard you were owing rent again. Is it true? Joke held her breath. Yes, Mama, Sibusiso replied. But we will fix it. There was silence for a few seconds. Then his mother spoke softly. My son, your father is angry. Very angry. Joke felt her heart drop. Outside, the rain stopped suddenly. And somewhere in the dark corridor, Mrs. Dlamini was standing quietly, listening, smiling to herself. Because what she was planning next was worse than eviction. And Joke had no idea that help would come from the last place she ever expected. Morning came too fast. The sun rose like nothing bad had happened, but inside Joke's chest, everything felt heavy. Sibusiso barely slept. He sat on the bed tying his worn-out shoes when Joke asked in a low voice, What did your mother say after the call? He hesitated before answering. She wants us to come home for now, he said. But my father said only I should come, not you. Joke's lips trembled. So he still thinks I am the mistake? Sibusiso sighed. He thinks marrying without money ruined my future. Before Joke could respond, they heard Mrs. Dlamini's heels again, clicking fast and angry down the corridor. This time she did not knock. She pushed the door open and walked in holding a small notebook. Good morning, tenants, she said with a fake smile. Have you found my money? Sibusiso shook his head slowly. Mrs. Dlamini laughed and wrote something in her book. Then start packing, she said. Joke stood up quickly. Please, madam, give us one more week, she begged. Mrs. Dlamini looked at her and smiled strangely. 1 week, she repeated. I can give you today till sunset. That's my kindness. Joke's voice broke. I'm pregnant. The room went quiet for a moment. Mrs. Dlamini stared at her, then rolled her eyes. Is pregnancy now rent? She asked coldly. Sibusiso's hands shook. Madam, this is wickedness, he said. Mrs. Dlamini turned sharply. Watch your mouth, she warned. This is my house. Just then a neighbor, Mama Njeri, appeared at the door. Dlamini, why are you shouting this early? She asked. Mrs. Dlamini smiled sweetly. I'm removing stubborn tenants, she replied. Mama Njeri frowned. The woman is pregnant, she said. Mrs. Dlamini shrugged. Did I put the baby there? Mama Njeri shook her head and whispered, God is watching. Mrs. Dlamini laughed. God should help them pay rent then, she said and walked away. Joke sat back down slowly, her breathing uneven. I feel pain, she whispered. Sibusiso panicked. Pain? Where? Before she could answer, there was another voice at the door. Excuse me, the man said calmly. They both looked up. He was tall, neatly dressed, and carried a small brown file. I'm looking for Mrs. Dlamini, he said. Sibusiso pointed down the corridor. The man nodded and turned to leave, then paused. Are you the tenants in room 7? He asked. Joke nodded weakly. The man looked at her carefully, especially her face. All right, he said quietly. I'll be back. Sibusiso watched him leave, confused. Who is that? He asked. Joke shook her head. I don't know, she said. But her heart was beating fast, not from fear this time, but from a strange feeling she could not explain. Outside, Mrs. Dlamini was already talking loudly to the man, her voice sweet like honey. Yes, yes, I'm the owner, she said proudly. The man listened without smiling. When he opened his file, Mrs. Dlamini's face changed slightly. She forced a laugh. Why are you asking about that property? She asked. The man raised his head and said calmly, because this building does not fully belong to you. Mrs. Dlamini froze. That was the first time her heels stopped clicking. Mrs. Dlamini forced a laugh when the man said the building did not fully belong to her. Young man, she said, waving her hand, you must be confused. My late husband built this place with his own money. The man did not argue. He simply opened his file and flipped a page. Madam, he said calmly, according to these records, this land was used as collateral for a loan 10 years ago. Her smile faded slowly. What loan? She asked sharply. The man looked up at her. A loan your husband never finished paying before he died. Mrs. Dlamini's throat moved as she swallowed hard. That is not possible, she snapped. I would know. Inside room 7, Sibusiso and Joke could hear every word through the thin walls. Something is wrong, Sibusiso whispered. Joke held her stomach gently. I feel dizzy, she said. Just then Mama Njeri rushed in. That man, she whispered. He came from the city office. I recognize that file. Sibusiso's eyes widened. City office? Mama Njeri nodded. They only come when something big is hiding. Joke felt a cold chill run through her body. For the first time since they moved into that house, hope knocked softly on her heart. Outside, Mrs. Dlamini's voice rose. My husband trusted people, she said angrily. If there was any loan, someone cheated him. The man nodded slowly. That is what we are investigating, he replied. But until it is cleared, rent collection is under review. Mrs. Dlamini stepped closer to him. Are you telling me I cannot collect my rent? She asked. He met her eyes. I'm saying you should be careful, he said. Especially with how you treat people. Her face turned red. Neighbors had started peeping from their doors. She noticed them and hissed, Mind your business. Joke stood up slowly and walked to the door despite Sibusiso's protest. She stood there quietly, listening. Mrs. Dlamini suddenly turned and saw her. Their eyes met. For a second no one spoke. Then Mrs. Dlamini said bitterly, Don't think this changes anything. Joke replied softly, Madam, we only asked for mercy. The word mercy hung in the air like smoke. Mrs. Dlamini looked away quickly. For a moment her eyes looked tired, afraid even. Then she straightened her back. You all will still leave today, she said loudly, as if convincing herself. The man closed his file. I will return, he said. Very soon. He walked away. Mrs. Dlamini watched him go, her hands shaking slightly. When she turned back, her anger returned. Everyone inside, she shouted. This house is not a playground. She stormed into her own apartment and slammed the door. Inside, she leaned against the wall and whispered to herself, This cannot happen again. Again. That word meant there was more to the story. Something from her past that refused to stay buried. Back in room 7, Joke sat down slowly. Sibusiso, she whispered, why do I feel like she's scared? Sibusiso nodded. People who shout too much are usually hiding something. Mama and Jerry crossed herself. Evil never rests forever, she said quietly. Outside, Mrs. Dlamini picked up her phone with trembling fingers. Hello, she said. We have a problem. And whoever was on the other end of that call was not happy. Mrs. Dlamini's voice was low on the phone, almost a whisper. They are asking questions, she said. Yes, the building. She paced her living room barefoot now, her heels abandoned near the door. Whoever was on the other end shouted loudly enough that even she pulled the phone away from her ear. I did exactly what you said, she replied angrily. I kept everyone in line. She stopped pacing and stared at the wall when the voice mentioned a name. Her face drained of color. No, she said firmly. That must never come out. She ended the call suddenly and stood there breathing hard, like someone who had just run a long distance. Outside, word was already spreading. Tenants gathered in small groups, whispering. Did you hear what the man said? One asked. They say the land is not fully hers, another replied. Mama and Jerry shook her head slowly. I always said her heart was too hard, she murmured. Inside room 7, Joke lay on the bed while Sibusiso sat beside her, holding her hand. If we leave today, Joke said softly, where will we go? Sibusiso didn't answer immediately. He was thinking about his parents, about pride, about shame. Let us wait till sunset, he finally said. Something feels unfinished. By afternoon, Mrs. Dlamini came out again, this time quieter. She stood in the corridor and cleared her throat. Anyone who pays rent should pay it to me as usual, she announced. A young man replied, but the city officer said, I said as usual, she cut in sharply. Her eyes moved quickly from face to face, like she was counting enemies. When she reached Joke and Sibusiso's door, she stopped. You, she said pointing. You will leave before dark. Joke looked up at her calmly. Madam, she said, if this house truly belongs to you, then God will support you. Mrs. Dlamini laughed nervously. Don't bring God into business, she snapped. Just then, a black car drove into the compound and stopped. Dust rose and settled slowly. Everyone turned to look. A woman stepped out, well-dressed, older, with a firm walk. She looked around once and asked, Who is Mrs. Dlamini? Silence followed. Mrs. Dlamini stepped forward slowly. I am, she said. The woman studied her face closely. My name is Nambula Kumalo, she said. I was your husband's first business partner. The ground seemed to shift beneath Mrs. Dlamini's feet. That's not possible, she whispered. Nambula raised an eyebrow. Then why does your husband's signature appear next to mine on the same loan documents? Gasps spread through the compound. Joke sat upright on the bed. Sibusiso whispered, Another loan? Nambula continued calmly, I have been looking for this place for years. Mrs. Dlamini's voice shook. He told me everything was settled. Nambula shook her head slowly. He lied, she said. And I think you knew. Mrs. Dlamini opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. For the first time, the woman who ruled the compound with fear looked small. As the sun leaned toward evening, tension hung heavy in the air. Joke felt the baby move and placed her hand on her stomach. Something is about to change, she whispered. Sibusiso nodded. Outside, Mrs. Dlamini lowered herself onto a plastic chair, her hands trembling. The people she once chased now stood watching her. And deep inside her chest, regret began to knock, softly but firmly. Because when the truth finally arrives, it never knocks twice. Nambula Kumalo did not raise her voice. That was what scared everyone. She spoke slowly, like each word had weight. Your late husband and I bought this land together, she said. When his business failed, he begged me to help him secure a loan. This building was part of the agreement. Mrs. Dlamini shook her head again and again. No, he would have told me, she muttered. Nambula looked at her with tired eyes. Some men hide their mistakes even from their wives, she replied. The words landed hard. Mrs. Dlamini's lips trembled, but she said nothing. Sibusiso stepped closer to Joke. So all this time, he whispered. Joke nodded slowly. She was fighting everyone because she was afraid, she said. Outside, Mama and Jerry spoke up. Then why punish innocent people? Nambula turned to her. Because fear makes people cruel, she answered. Mrs. Dlamini suddenly stood up. Enough, she shouted. Even if there was a loan, I have been managing this place alone since he died. I suffered. Namvula did not deny it. Yes, you suffered, she said. But suffering does not give you the right to destroy others. Mrs. Dlamini turned sharply toward Joke. And you, she snapped. You think you've won? Joke stood slowly despite the pain in her body. No, madam, she said gently. We only wanted time. Her calm voice confused Mrs. Dlamini more than shouting ever could. Sibusiso added quietly, my parents taught me that power without kindness becomes evil. Mrs. Dlamini laughed bitterly. Your parents? She said. Where were mine when I needed help? The question slipped out before she could stop herself. Silence followed. That was the first crack in her armor. Namvula closed her file. The city will investigate, she said. Until then, no tenant leaves this compound. A soft wave of relief passed through the crowd. Joke held Sibusiso's hand tightly. Mrs. Dlamini opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. She looked around and realized something painful. Nobody feared her anymore. The power she used to enjoy was slipping through her fingers. She walked slowly back to her apartment, each step heavy. The corridor that once echoed with her confident heels now swallowed her footsteps in silence. Inside her room, Mrs. Dlamini sat on the bed and stared at the wall. Memories rushed in without permission. Her husband shouting. Papers hidden in drawers. Nights she chose not to ask questions because money was coming in. She whispered to herself, I was only protecting what was mine. But even she could hear how weak that sounded. Outside, Joke leaned against Sibusiso. Do you think she will change? She asked. Sibusiso looked toward Mrs. Dlamini's door. People change when they finally meet the truth, he replied. And the truth was no longer knocking. It was already inside the house. Night fell quietly, but sleep refused to visit the compound. Mrs. Dlamini sat alone in her dark room, the bulb above her flickering like it was tired of shining. Her phone buzzed on the table. She stared at it for a long moment before answering. Yes, she said. It was her brother-in-law, Bongani. His voice was sharp. Namvula called me, he said. She says the truth is out. Mrs. Dlamini swallowed hard. You promised me this would never happen, she replied. Bongani sighed. You promised me you were collecting enough money to clear the debt, he said. The line went quiet. Then he added, Where is the money? Mrs. Dlamini closed her eyes. For years she had taken rent without asking herself where it truly went. Repairs, pride, silence. I did my best, she whispered. Bongani laughed bitterly. Your best destroyed people, he said and ended the call. She dropped the phone and covered her face. For the first time since her husband's death, she cried, not loud, not dramatic, but deep and heavy, like someone finally feeling pain they had been running from. In room 7, Joke could not sleep either. The baby kicked again, stronger this time. This child is stubborn, she said with a weak smile. Sibusiso laughed softly. Just like you, he replied. Then his face turned serious. When I called my parents again, he said, my mother cried. Joke looked at him. Why? She asked. She said she judged you without knowing your heart, he replied. Joke's eyes filled with tears. Did your father say anything? She asked. Sibusiso nodded slowly. He said a man who allows injustice is poorer than a man without money. Early the next morning, a knock came at Mrs. Dlamini's door. This time she jumped. When she opened it, Namvula stood there with another man older with a walking stick. Namvula spoke gently. Mrs. Dlamini, she said, this is Mr. Mthembu, your husband's former lawyer. Mrs. Dlamini stepped back, her knees weak. Why is he here? She asked. Mr. Mthembu cleared his throat. Because your husband left a letter, he said. And you were never meant to read it alone. Inside the small sitting room, the letter was opened. Mr. Mthembu read aloud. The words cut deep. Her husband admitted to the loan, to the lies, and to using tenants' rent to cover his mistakes. He apologized not just to Namvula, but to the people who would one day suffer because of his silence. Mrs. Dlamini's hands shook violently. So it wasn't only me, she whispered. Namvula nodded. But you continued it, she said softly. That was the hardest part. The truth did not shout. It simply stood there. Outside, tenants waited quietly. When Mrs. Dlamini finally stepped out, her shoulders were bent. She looked older. She looked human. Her eyes met Joke's. For a long moment she said nothing. Then she spoke, her voice low. I was wrong, she said. Gasps followed. She turned to Joke and Sibusiso. You can stay, she added. Not because I am afraid, but because I regret. Joke felt tears slide down her face. Sibusiso held her closer. Some apologies come late, but they still matter. Mrs. Dlamini looked around the compound she once ruled with fear. From today, she said, this house will not be run by cruelty. She paused and added quietly, because evil always meets its match. And as she walked back inside without her heels, without her shouting, the compound felt lighter, like a heavy door had finally been opened. The next morning the sun rose gently over the Kibra roofs, painting everything gold. Joke stepped outside, holding Sibusiso's hand and feeling the soft warmth of hope. The compound felt different. Mrs. Dlamini stood at the corner, watching silently. Her posture was not proud or loud this time. It was small, almost humble. She looked older, worn by guilt and regret. For the first time, the people she once scared did not tremble. They simply watched her, waiting. And she could not hide. Joke turned to Sibusiso. Do you think she understands now? She asked. Sibusiso nodded slowly. She saw what fear does. She met her match and survived it. Maybe now she can change. Mrs. Dlamini's heels were gone. Her high-pitched shouts replaced with quiet steps. She walked slowly to the middle of the compound and spoke in a voice that trembled. I'm sorry. I let fear control me. I punished people who never harmed me. I will try to do better. The tenants looked at her in disbelief. Some whispered, some nodded. Mama Injeri crossed herself. Finally, she said softly, even the hardest hearts break. Mrs. Dlamini returned to her room and sat silently. The house, once ruled by cruelty, felt lighter. She whispered to herself, if only I had faced the truth sooner, how much pain I could have avoided. Outside, Joke and Sibusiso watched the rain clouds disappear, replaced by sunlight. For the first time in weeks they smiled without fear. The baby kicked happily as if celebrating. Sibusiso laughed softly. Sometimes, he said, life shows you that evil cannot last forever. It always meets its match. Joke hugged him tightly. And mercy wins when fear ends, she added. As they walked toward their room, Joke glanced back at Mrs. Dlamini's door. The landlady had finally met herself, her own greed, fear and pride, and for the first time she felt regret. A lesson had been learned, though painfully. Cruelty always finds a mirror, and justice comes quietly, not with shouting. Outside, the tenants whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads, some smiling. Life continued, but no one forgot the lesson. Fear cannot control forever. Only honesty and compassion can. Now let me ask you honestly. If you were the husband, would you stay and endure the suffering with your wife under a wicked landlady, or would you leave her behind and travel abroad to follow your parents, hoping things get better later? And if you were the landlady, after discovering the truth about your husband and his family, would you choose forgiveness, or would you hold on to anger forever? Tell me in the comments, what would you do?